Merry Christmas and happy holidays from everyone here at the Georgia Gazette. For this holiday season, we'd like to do something special, so we decided, how about a crossover?
The holidays, they're supposed to be a magical time of year. Whether you celebrate Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, or just the simple quietness of winter, there's something special in the air this time of year. The lights, the music, the smells of cinnamon, vanilla, and pine, and for a few short weeks, it feels like the world softens a little. Especially in a small southern town where neighbors wave from their porches and kids are excited for the night that Santa visits.
It's that mix of nostalgia and hope. That feeling that no matter what's going on, everything might just be okay. Now, imagine a place where that feeling never ends. A town where it's Christmas year-round.
Streets named Candy Cane Road and Rudolph Way. Streetlights shaped like ornaments. A place literally called Santa Claus, Georgia. Sounds like a Hallmark movie, right?
But in December of 1997, this little town, the one built on joy, magic, and the innocence of children, became the scene of something almost too horrific to believe. Because in a home that was meant to protect children, a foster home that opened its doors to kids in need, safety itself became the illusion.
The Daniels were the kind of people every community hopes for. Warm, steady, selfless. The matriarch of the family had actually grown up in the foster care system herself, and the couple had made it their mission to give other children the same kind of stable, loving home that they never had. Their house in Santa Claus, Georgia was supposed to be a sanctuary for them, a safe place where broken kids could finally exhale and be loved.
But that December, horror found its way in, and the person who brought it through their door wasn't a stranger. He was one of them. A young man who had once called that house home, in a town where it was Christmas every day. That holiday magic shattered overnight.
Today we're going behind the headlines of the Santa Claus murders, the story of the Daniels family, the town that loved children, and the unthinkable betrayal that forever changed what safe meant in Santa Claus, Georgia.
Because one thing is certain, once your fate is sealed, there's no turning back. The gavel has fallen.
If you could imagine a town built on pure Christmas spirit, it would look a lot like Santa Claus, Georgia. Tucked away in Toombs County, nearly about 200 miles south of Atlanta, Santa Claus feels like something straight out of a snow globe. It's the kind of place that sounds made up, like a setting from a Hallmark or Lifetime movie, or a holiday theme park where the magic, the Christmas magic, never truly fades. But it's real, a population of only 200 residents, and for the people who live there, Christmas isn't just a season, it's a way of life. Drive down its quiet streets and you'll find yourself on Candy Cane Road, Rudolph Way, Slay Street, and December Drive. Even the City Hall sits proudly at 25 December Drive. Yes, literally December 25th. The town's motto, the city that loves children. Founded back in the 1930s by a pecan farmer named C.G. Green, the town was originally supposed to be just a simple, clever marketing idea. A way to lure travelers off Highway 1 to buy pecans, visit local restaurants, and stay the night. Simply just supposed to be a little spot Georgians could escape to while bringing in some tourism to the small community. Now, this man called his little roadside business Santa Claus, and then, over time, a handful of homes popped up around it. And by 1941, the place was officially incorporated as a city, one that leaned all the way into its Christmas identity and the holiday spirit. Even as the years passed and the interstate pulled travelers away, the people of Santa Claus never let that magic fade. The decorations stayed up year-round, the themed street signs still shine bright red and green in the Georgia heat. And for the few hundred folks who happen to call Santa Claus, Georgia their home, the holiday spirit isn't something they take down after December. It's woven into everyday life. Now, despite its size, Santa Claus still draws curious visitors from all over the country. Folks who can't resist stopping in to snap a photo in front of the town's lavishly decorated city hall, decked out in lights that never seem to go dark. And then, just down the road, there's a big red mailbox labeled Santa's Mail that overflows with letters and postcards sent in yearly every single December. More than 1,000 of them, all stamped with the famous 25 December Drive postmark. The town even has a tiny chapel that never closes. Its doors open 24 hours a day. Outside, a quiet path called Santa's Garden winds through neatly trimmed shrubs and twinkling lights. This is literally the kind of place where faith and festivity live side by side, where Christmas and Christianity are just part of the same heartbeat, part of the same town. As city clerk Barbara Ward once said, everybody here believes in Jesus and believes in Santa Claus. We have neighbors that are neighbors, but they're not the noisy neighbors.
And that's exactly what Santa Claus, Georgia feels like, the North Pole of the South, a little pocket of perpetual holiday cheer tucked into the red clay and pine trees of Toombs County. But like many small southern towns, Santa Claus, Georgia is more than its postcard image. It's tight-knit, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where your word travels fast, and where isolation can cut both ways. There's comfort in that closeness, but also a quiet vulnerability. Help doesn't always come quick out there, and when tragedy strikes, it echoes and stings for a long, long time. So when violence eventually did come to Santa Claus, when the illusion of perfect safety shattered, it wasn't just a crime that broke the peace. It was a wound that pierced the heart of a town built on joy, kindness, and childlike wonder. And a town that proudly calls itself the city that loves children. No family embodied that promise more than the Daniels family. Danny and Kim Daniels weren't just residents of Santa Claus. They were the heartbeat of what the town stood for. Kim had grown up in the foster care system herself. Her childhood was marked by loss and instability. She had actually seen her own father be killed at a young age herself, leaving emotional and mental scars for the rest of her life. From there, Kim spent years bouncing between homes, struggling with drug abuse, living out of her car, and as a teenager, she even lost custody of her own child for a time. She knew what it meant to feel unwanted, unseen, and unloved. But Kim refused to let her story end in heartbreak. She would soon meet Danny Daniels, a gentle, soft-spoken mailman who also taught Sunday school at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting in 1992. Danny was able to help Kim as she battled through her addiction. Both had weathered storms of their own, fought their own demons, and together they found something steady, something good, something pure, true love. Danny's kindness gave Kim the chance to rebuild. She fought hard, got her children back, beat the battle of drug addiction, and slowly her life began to fill with light again. By 1995, Kim and Danny decided to share that light. They opened their doors to children who had nowhere else to go, kids the system had almost given up on. Over the next few years, they fostered many children, creating the kind of home Kim had always dreamed of when she was young. Safe, warm, full of laughter and love. There's something profoundly telling about Kim Daniels. Her past was filled with struggle, but instead of letting it define her, she turned it into purpose, opening her heart and her home to children who needed the same refuge she once searched for. The Daniels' small, quaint house sat just off Candy Cane Road, surrounded by open Georgia fields. Inside, there was always noise, the good kind. The sound of children running through the hallways, the smell of dinner on the stove, the hum of family life. It wasn't fancy, but it was home, especially for kids in need.
And when Christmas 1997 rolled around, Kim made sure it was magical. The holidays were in fact her favorite time of year, of course, and maybe because she'd known that, what it felt like to spend them alone. She never wanted another child to feel that same way. So she spent months shopping for presents, tucking gifts away in the attic until the big day, planning elaborate dinners for the entire family. Every December, the Daniels house glowed brighter than any other on Candy Cane Road. Kim's former foster father once said this about her and Danny. They were good, God-fearing people. They were a storybook family. They took children nobody else wanted and gave them a good, decent home. And that's exactly who Kim and Danny were. Two people who turned their own broken past into something beautiful. But in December of 1997, that beauty was destroyed. The Daniels family, who had built their lives around protecting children, became victims of a horror that no one in Santa Claus could have ever imagined. Because the evil that found them didn't come from outside their walls. It came from someone who had once been welcomed inside. And the illusion of safety in this storybook town crumbled in one single night, leaving behind a silence that even Christmas lights couldn't brighten. On the night of December 4th, 1997, just days before the town's favorite holiday, the Daniels household was full. The couple had 7 children living under that small brick roof. The couple had a few biological children, but had 3 foster children living with them at the time, whom they were in the process of planning to adopt. It was a home built on love and hope, a sanctuary for children who had nowhere else to go. But just after midnight, that sanctuary was shattered. A 20-year-old man, later identified as Jerry Scott Heidler, broke into the Daniels house through a bathroom window. Silently, he moved through the darkened rooms and entered Kim and Danny Daniels' bedroom. He took a semi-automatic shotgun from their gun cabinet and shot the couple in their sleep. Next, he turned his violence onto their children. Bryant Daniels, their 8-year-old son, was shot while he slept. And then their daughter, 16-year-old Jessica Daniels, ran toward her parents' bedroom after hearing gunfire erupt that night. That's when Jerry Heidler shot her in the back of the head. By the time the attack ended, 2 of the couple's biological children, Bryant and Jessica, were both dead. But the devastation didn't end there. The attacker then forced 3 of the family's young daughters, 2 biological and 1 foster, into his van and drove the girls to an isolated area outside of town. Now, it's here where Jerry sexually assaulted one of the girls. Eventually, Jerry abandoned them on a rural road about 30 miles from Santa Claus in Bacon County, where a farmer ended up finding them and immediately alerted the authorities.
The 2 youngest children, a 4-year-old boy and a 10-month-old infant, remained in the house untouched physically, but left the unspeakable aftermath of violence. The distinction is heartbreaking. The tragedy directly claimed the lives of 2 of the Daniels' biological children, while their foster care children survived but endured trauma of their own. The family's devotion to vulnerable kids, their open hearts, made them easy, vulnerable targets in a crime that would horrify and haunt this small town. 3 hours later, Toombs County Deputy Mike Harlan arrived at the Daniels' home, and when he arrived on the scene, he noticed that their house was strangely lit in the pre-dawn darkness. He knocked on the front door, which was slightly ajar, but there was no answer. He instantly knew this was odd because it was the middle of the night. Peering through one of the windows, he then saw the arm of a child in a bunk bed. As he stepped inside the home, the scene he encountered was almost too much to bear. The scene inside the Daniels' home was nothing short of devastating, the kind of horror no one in Santa Claus, Georgia could have ever imagined. Investigators later described it as one of the worst they had ever seen. Each victim had been shot at close range, basically execution style. The violence so intense it left almost no room for confusion about what happened. Danny and Kim Daniels were found in their bedroom, underneath the sheets of their own bed. Their lives ended in an instant. It appeared Kim may have woken in the final moment, just long enough to see the face of the person she trusted most turn into that of her killer. Nearby, 8-year-old Bryant was discovered still in bed on the top bunk in his room. He had been shot through the eye, his small arms wrapped around his teddy bear, a heartbreaking image of the innocence lost that night. The Daniels' teenage daughter, Jessica, had collapsed in the hallway as she tried to reach her parents' room. Her body completed the devastating picture. The parents and 2 of their children killed in what had been, moments before, a home full of love. The walls told the story before anyone spoke a word. A violent eruption in what had always been a home filled with laughter and love. Investigators gathered spent shotgun shells scattered across the room, silent evidence of the unimaginable violence that had unfolded within what was once the safest house in town. However, in the dining room, the deputy found the couple's 4-year-old son, who had been left unharmed during the entire terrifying ordeal. That boy would tell the deputy words that still haunt him today. "Mama and Daddy are dead. Brother Guy shot them all." The house that had stood for years as a place of refuge, of safety, and of care had been transformed into a scene of unimaginable tragedy. And in the quiet pre-dawn hours, the small town of Santa Claus, Georgia would wake to a reality that no Christmas magic could erase.
But the horror didn't come from a stranger. The man who brought this violence into the Daniels' home wasn't just familiar with the family. He had once lived under their roof, called them family, and been welcomed as one of their own. The surviving 4-year-old called him Brother Guy. The surviving children were the ones who had told investigators who had killed their parents. Again, this was someone they knew, someone they trusted, someone they had even considered to be family. And it's this personal betrayal that would make the tragedy even more unfathomable. That person was Jerry Scott Heidler, though the children just knew him as Scott Taylor. Now, he wasn't a stranger. He had, at one point, like I've been saying, lived under the Daniels roof while trying to straighten up his own life, battling drug and alcohol issues. Later, when the Daniels family fostered his biological sister, Joanne, Jerry would visit their home regularly. Even after his sister left their care, he continued to stop by. He ended up being a familiar figure in a house that was already full of children. But before word went around in this small town about who actually killed members of the Daniels family, a heartbreaking rumor started that it was actually the kind-hearted Danny Daniels who caused all this devastation. Now, Jerry's own early life had been troubled. He had open heart surgery as a child and spent time in multiple foster homes due to neglect. Now, he carried imaginary friends with him, like many small kids do, feared the dark, and struggled with severe anxiety. Returning to his biological father did very little to stabilize him. He attended a school for children with learning disabilities and even reportedly harmed himself by picking at his skin. Trauma, instability marked his entire childhood. Now, Jerry Scott Heidler's childhood was deeply troubled from the very beginning. He was born in Georgia in 1977 and spent much of his early life in foster care, as I mentioned, removed from a neglectful and abusive household. His mother and stepfather created a chaotic environment filled with threats, instability, and fear. Jerry struggled with self-harm, imaginary friends, and even frequent psychiatric hospitalizations. And by the age of 11, he was already battling alcohol addiction as well as having thoughts of suicide. Now, many of his own siblings would eventually end up in prison, a reflection of the dysfunction that had surrounded him from a very early age, and a perfect example of the environment that he was born into. He ended up dropping out of school in the 10th grade, but was never really able to hold down a steady job. He never owned a car, and he was always mooching money off of people. A witness would later describe him in the trial, saying that Jerry had a reputation for being a, quote, oddball, and that his family was known to often move from place to place quite frequently, equating them to be gypsies. This defense witness said that after spending time in different foster care homes during his childhood, Jerry eventually ended up in a special treatment state school because of his emotional problems and mental health struggles. Psychologists who later examined him testified that Jerry suffered from severe borderline personality disorder, showing classic symptoms like fear of abandonment, intense emotional swings, and impulsive, sometimes self-destructive behavior. Experts concluded that much of his early life left him with little control over his actions, a volatile mix of trauma, genetics, and unresolved rage. At times, Kim and Daniel felt sorry for him, a witness said. They were out to help people. Scott Heidler happened to be one of those people.
And by that time, he was a young adult. Jerry Heidler was already well acquainted with the Daniels family and their household. During his visits, he became familiar with their daily routines and tragically formed a disturbing romantic attachment and then a relationship with their teenage daughter, Jessica, who was only 16 years old at the time, whereas Jerry was 20. So as you can imagine, when Danny Daniels discovered the nature of their relationship, he was upset. He didn't like the age gap between the two and didn't want them together. That's when it was believed he confronted Jerry Heidler, who then subsequently stopped visiting the family home. Months later, Jerry Heidler experienced another personal tragedy. His then girlfriend gave birth to a stillborn child. Distraught and emotionally unstable, he actually attended his child's funeral the morning before inflicting the horrors and his wrath on the Daniels and their children. Now, let's make this clear. This was not a random act of violence. This was someone who had lived in their house, shared in their family life, and felt entitled enough or enraged enough to bring unimaginable horror into a home and family that had once taken him in. It was the ultimate betrayal, a man they had once taken into their home, treated like family, turning their kindness into the very thing that cost them their lives. Thanks to the accounts and the bravery of the surviving young girls, investigators immediately knew who had committed this horrific act. Instantly, deputies knew it wasn't a random attack. It was personal, gruesome, and targeted. The children's testimony provided the critical thread that led authorities straight to Jerry Scott Heidler. It was never a matter of who done it. It was a matter of why. Approximately 7 hours after the Daniels family was brutally murdered and kidnapped, Jerry Heidler was arrested in Alma, Georgia. not far from where he had roots and family connections. GBI agents tracked him down to his own mother's house, where he was hiding in a crawl space beneath the home. When authorities ordered him out, he initially refused, forcing 2 officers to crawl in and physically remove him. In the hours after the killings, Jerry Heidler's behavior was chillingly casual. Immediately following the murders, he had thrown the shotgun into a river, visited the grave of his stillborn child, and gone to his mother's house to play video games before falling asleep, as if he didn't just wipe out an entire family. When questioned, he reportedly described the murders as if they were a fever dream, a sign of his emotional detachment, state of his mental health, and denial that would come to define much of his trial. Jerry Heidler was quickly charged with 4 counts of murder, 3 counts of kidnapping, and multiple sexual assault and burglary charges. His brother was also arrested for obstructing justice. But the critical breakthrough, the connection from the crime scene to the perpetrator, had come from the courage and clarity of the surviving children, who knew him as someone familiar, someone who had once been part of their home. Without their accounts, the path to justice may have been far longer and far more uncertain. In the wake of unthinkable trauma, it was the smallest voices that carried the greatest strength. The surviving children who remembered, who spoke, and who ensured their family would not be forgotten and that justice would be served. After his arrest, Jerry Scott Heidler faced a Toombs County grand jury in March 1998, indicted on multiple counts including murder, kidnapping, and sexual assault. The state quickly announced it would seek the death penalty. However, Jerry pleaded innocent to all charges, but the magnitude of the crime, the cold calculated killing of a family, including innocent children in the small trusting town, made the case impossible to ignore. Jerry Heidler's own recounting of the murders to authorities during his confession was chillingly detached. He described entering the house through a bathroom window, shooting Bryant first, then Jessica, and finally Kim and Danny Daniels. He recalled having to reload the shotgun, the kick of the weapon, and the thwack of each blast. Yet, at least according to him, it all felt like a dream. He told investigators all the events that happened that night, describing how he then kidnapped 3 young girls, sexually assaulted 1, and abandoned them on a rural road before returning to his mother's house. One agent noted, he understood what he was saying, but the gravity of what he'd done, he was indifferent to it.
Because of the extensive media coverage, his trial was moved from Toombs County to Walton County in December of 1998 to ensure a fair, impartial jury. On August 23, 1999, he stood trial before a jury of 7 men and 5 women. The prosecution painted the murders as methodical and deliberate, arguing that Jerry Heidler's motive stemmed from Danny Daniels' intervention over his inappropriate attention and romantic relationship with his 16-year-old daughter, Jessica Daniels, one of the people who he had brutally gunned down. The defense sought to frame Jerry as a mentally ill young man, emphasizing a lifetime of abuse, neglect, and psychological trauma. His defense attorneys pleaded for compassion, reminding the jury of Jerry Heidler's childhood struggles. One of his lawyers even compared executing Jerry to, quote, witch burnings of earlier centuries, end quote, and highlighted testimony from his former teachers, social workers, and family who described him as a man in need of psychiatric care, not death. By the time closing arguments came, the evidence against Jerry Heidler was, let's face it, overwhelming. His confession, fingerprints, DNA, and witness accounts left very little doubt. The defense didn't try to deny his guilt. Instead, again, they pleaded for mercy. Michael Garrett implored the jury, saying, quote, about 350 years ago, our ancestors would know what to do about Scott Heidler. They say he's possessed by the devil, let's burn him. It's a supreme irony that here we are in 1999, and you are asking to burn him literally. Have we not progressed as a civilization any farther than that? District Attorney Richard Malone countered the defense arguments forcefully, emphasizing personal responsibility and accountability, calling Jerry Heidler the personification of consummate evil. The DA underscored the premeditation and brutality of the murders and reminded the jury that these acts didn't just destroy the Daniels family, they scarred the town of Santa Claus, Georgia forever. District Attorney Richard Malone said this, what happened in that house is consummate evil. Jerry Scott Heidler had a terrible childhood, yes, but when are we going to expect him to take responsibility for his actions? The clash between compassion and accountability, between Jerry Heidler's troubled past and the horror of his crimes, left the jury with the heavy burden of deciding not just a verdict, but the fate of a young man who had committed unspeakable brutal acts. Now, despite the defense's arguments, the jury deliberated for only about 20 minutes before finding Jerry guilty on all 11 counts, including the murders of Danny, Kim, Jessica, and Bryant Daniels, the kidnapping of the 3 children, and the sexual assault of 1. The jury rejected the claim that he was mentally ill enough to avoid responsibility. So then, on September 4th, 1999, Jerry Heidler, at just 22 years old, was sentenced to death for each of the 4 murders, plus 2 life sentences for kidnapping and sodomy, and over 100 additional years for other crimes. Now, as his sentence was read, Jerry reportedly broke down into tears. The first actual sign of emotion that he had showed any empathy or possibly even guilt during the entire trial. Jurors themselves were visibly shaken, many in tears. Kim Daniels' sister said this: "He did what he did for no reason, and I feel he needs to pay for it." Even during the pre-trial phase, Jerry Heidler's validity was clear. In July 1999, while awaiting trial, he had actually escaped from Toombs County Jail along with 9 other prisoners, evading capture briefly before being arrested 12 hours later in Vidalia, Georgia. Now, jail authorities later discovered 75 homemade weapons in his cell, evidence of his calculated and dangerous mind. Now, his escape from jail, as well as the threats he had made to officials, only then strengthened the prosecution case that Jerry Heidler had remained a huge threat to society, contrasting the narrative that the defense was making, that he was simply just a victim of his circumstances in childhood and had struggled with his mental health. In the end, justice was delivered, and the Daniels family finally received some measure of closure. But the story of Jerry Heidler's crimes and the young, innocent lives who he destroyed continues to haunt Santa Claus, Georgia, a town once only known for its joy and optimism, now forever marked and scarred by this tragedy.
And ironically, even after the jury handed down the death sentence, not everyone saw Jerry Heidler as a monster. His biological mother, Mary Mosley, acknowledged that her son had been troubled, but she remained steadfast in her belief that he was innocent. "I raised Scotty," she told the court. "Scotty did not do that murder." When District Attorney Richard Malone pressed her by asking, even though a jury found him guilty of it, Mary Mosley supposedly just simply shook her head, no. "He loved that family. He cared for that family. My family cared for that family," she said. "He's not that kind of person. You've got to know him to know if he's capable of that." Her words stood in sharp relief against the horror Jerry Heidler had inflicted on an innocent family, on innocent children. Even in the face of overwhelming evidence and a unanimous death sentence, she saw the son she knew, or at least the son she wanted to see. A realization that behind every tragedy are complicated human stories that defy simple answers. Even after his conviction and death sentence, Jerry Heidler continued to fight his case through the courts. In May 2000, just 8 months after being sentenced, he filed an appeal to the Georgia Supreme Court, seeking to overturn his conviction or win a new trial. However, the court dismissed that appeal. Over the following 2 decades, Jerry Heidler's legal team pursued multiple federal appeals, all of which have been rejected. In 2014 by a federal district court, in 2019 by another U.S. district judge, and in 2023 by the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. His final appeal was denied by the U.S. Supreme Court on May 20th, 2024, leaving his death sentence intact. Today, Jerry Heidler still remains on death row at the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification State Prison, still awaiting a date for his execution. His case is still moving slowly through Georgia's long and winding process toward execution, reminding us just how long justice can take in Georgia, where decades often pass between sentencing and execution. However, in the days and weeks after the murders, the small, tight-knit community of Santa Claus rallied together. According to the Georgia Department of Human Resources, DFCS staff in Toombs County worked around the clock to place the surviving children in homes with other relatives and even held emergency meetings to support their own trauma-laden workers who had witnessed and investigated such a horrific, monstrous crime. The town that hadn't seen a homicide in more than half a century before this heinous murder was irreversibly changed forever, and yet the town's holiday spirit remained. Even decades later, the red post box on 25 December Drive still receives thousands of cards each and every holiday season, a testament that Santa Claus, Georgia continues to wear its Christmas identity, even as the memory of that dark night continues to linger over the small Georgia town. Decades later, the shadow of the Daniels family murders still hangs over Santa Claus, Georgia. Once likely the safest and happiest small town in the state, it became forever linked to one of Georgia's most shocking mass murders. Jerry Heidler remains one of the state's most infamous criminals, and the case continues to captivate public attention. The tragedy has inspired books and documentaries, including Doug Crandall's 2009 The Fear Came to Town, The Santa Claus, Georgia Murders, which delves into the crime and legal aftermath, and the 2019 Oxygen true crime documentary series Homicide for the Holidays, which reenacted the events of that fateful December night. In the end, the story of Santa Claus, Georgia, and the Daniels family is both heartbreaking and strangely uplifting. A town built on holiday cheer and the promise of innocence was forever shaken by a tragedy that no one could have ever imagined. This case reminds us that feelings of safety and innocence can still be shattered even in places that seem the safest. And yet the spirit of the Daniels lives on, a family whose hearts overflowed with love for children, whose joy for Christmas was boundless, and whose kindness defined the very essence of the community. As one local said, to remember the Daniels is to celebrate Christmas, because that was how deeply they loved the holidays. And so, even decades later, Santa Claus continues to honor that legacy, keeping decorations up year-round, sending letters from Santa's mail, and carrying forward a spirit of generosity, resilience, and hope. Even after the darkest night, the light of love and holiday cheer still burns brightly in this little town that refuses to forget, ensuring that holiday cheer will continue to shine bright for decades to come.
The Daniels family murders left a scar that Santa Claus, Georgia could never erase. A town once defined by laughter, lights, and the warmth of holiday cheer suddenly confronted a darkness it had never known. In an instant, the sense of safety that had been woven into the very fabric of this small, close-knit community was instantly shattered, leaving neighbors, friends, and children to grapple with a reality they could not have imagined. Yet, amid the grief, the town displayed quiet strength. Those surviving children of this massacre, forced to witness horrors no child should ever see, showed extraordinary courage in helping authorities bring the perpetrator to justice. Now, it's their bravery, alongside the countless neighbors, deputies, social workers, and local officials who rallied to care for them, that became the first threads in repairing a community that had been ripped apart. Now, decades later, Santa Claus continues to honor the Daniels legacy, not through sorrow alone, but through the values that the family had embodied: generosity, care, and an unwavering love for children, especially for children in need. Christmas lights still glow along Candy Cane Road. The little post office continues sending letters across the country, and families gather in a town that, despite the weight of this tragedy, chose resilience over despair. The memory of the Daniels family and the courage of those who survived live on as proof that even when the unthinkable strikes, a community can endure, heal, and continue to shine. For most of us, the excitement of the holidays comes and goes just once a year. A few weeks of lights, music, magic, and celebration before life returns to its usual rhythm. But in Santa Claus, Georgia, that magic lives year-round. Every street, every decoration, every Santa's mail letter keeps the spirit of Christmas here alive, even as the town carries the weight of its darkest night forever. Here, the joy of the season exists side by side with memory and loss, a testament to resilience and the enduring heart of a community that refuses to let horror define it. One thing is certain: in honoring the Daniels family, Santa Claus celebrates the joy they brought to every child under their small roof, proving that even in the shadow of tragedy, the warmth of the holidays can continue to shine. Until next time, stay safe and happy holidays on behalf of the Georgia Gazette.